Hello, I'm going to try to answer David Sherwood's question as to whether economic sanctions are an effective tool and under what circumstances are they most likely to be effective. Daniel raised two examples, the one cited in the book regarding economic sanctions against Cuba, and then the question of sanctions against Russia for its annexation of Crimea. The problem with assessing the overall success of sanctions in general, and the two cited specifically, is that the acting parties and the targets of the sanctions, as well as the nature of the sanctions, are all unique and in the circumstances are so varied that the outcomes are also highly variable. In the case of Cuba, for most of the time the trade sanctions were in place, Russia supplied enough economic support to Cuba that they could get by without a U.S. trade relationship. So the impact of the sanctions never caused enough pain such that the population would rise up against Castro and the military. As to the sanctions against Russia, Russia still maintains generally successful trade relationships across their sphere of influence. So they still have enough nations that push the Russian economy along. The people that have been hurt are mostly the oligarchs because they're slowed in their acquisition of wealth, but it's not apparently causing them much pain or lasting pain because they play the long game. Now, as far as the general success rates of trade sanctions, it seems that it's mostly a matter of the nature of the government that's in place. Gary Schiffman, the author of the chapter in the text, argues on page 213 that economic sanctions have very limited success against regimes headed by dictators like North Korea and Cuba, because their goal is not economic security, but regime security. So we're using economic pressures to try to force regime change, and they don't mean the same thing to dictators that they would mean to the head of capitalist societies. Which means that, on the other hand, countries that have some form of election process, like Iran, are more likely to respond to sanctions because even though the top leadership might not be directly threatened because of the way they hold power there, the hardships felt by the voters can lead to changes in low and middle level government, and over time, that would pose a regime threat. So there's because there's threats to societal security, and then the top leadership could be toppled as a result of that. So I hope that answers your question, and thank you for your time.